Joining us today is Cilla Robinson, Senior Associate Workplace Relations, Employment and Safety at Clayton Utz, who'll be speaking at IIR's Sexual Harassment in the Workplace Forum, which takes place on the 6th and 7th of December 2010 in Sydney. Hello Cilla, thanks for joining us today.
Hi James, how are you going?
How do you think that Australian companies will change their policy in regard of sexual harassment in light of the DJ case?
I think the case will mean that companies really focus on board duties and corporate governance issues. They'll revisit their policies and just consider sexual harassment as a real issue generally. The case highlights the need for leading from the top down and really creating a positive culture and living and breathing the policies as opposed to just having a document that nobody ever reads. It's likely that companies, I think, will review their harassment and discrimination policies and also consider how they're actually presented to employees. And there'll also be a need to reflect on whether those policies are just aspirational statements or whether they really reflect the true circumstances. Additionally, employers must be careful about what they say and take sexual harassment prevention and compliance seriously to ensure that their policies actually reflect this. I think as well as policy change, there will likely be a shift in behaviours. Directors will need to check their organisation has adopted a system to prevent sexual harassment and need to monitor the operation of the system once it's in place and act on any information from their staff that it's not working. The directors aren't alone in this. Senior managers will need to develop and implement the proper system, act on any complaints and report policy breaches, and enforce the policy fairly and consistently. And very importantly, in relation to the DJ's case, report to the board on any policy breaches. I think the main message is really to act as we say we will in the policy. A big issue really is compliance with and the effectiveness of policies rather than necessarily a need to, rewrite policies or start from scratch.
Do you think the outcome of the DJ case will actually discourage victims of sexual harassment from taking action against their employers in the future?
Look, James, I really hope that won't be the case. The massive publicity the case has received shines a light on the issue of sexual harassment, but unfortunately is also the very reason why some women may be discouraged from making claims. Whilst it's true that Fraser Kirk has done what she has done is been very brave and has everybody talking about sexual harassment, everybody in Australia knows who she is. And not very many victims of sexual harassment would want to reveal themselves with that level of publicity. I think many women don't bring claims because they feel it will negatively impact on their career, and certainly I've heard many clients comment that whilst they've got sympathy for Fraser Kirk, they'd think twice before hiring her. So obviously the case has left many people thinking, was it all worth it? In relation to was it all worth it, she's settled for $850,000, an amount that she was allegedly offered prior to the media circus, and before the bulk of her legal costs would have escalated. I mean, it's estimated that about $30,000 would go to her lawyers to harmers, which leaves her with a little over $500,000, and she's potentially unemployable for a while. So, the toll that she's paid is quite high. Her lawyers asserted during the case that she was suffering a psychological breakdown, which is a really high price to pay. And I think victims will really fear the glare of publicity that this case illustrates, and that will definitely put some people off, there's no doubt. It's estimated that the vast majority of sexual harassment victims don't actually report it, let alone commence legal proceedings, and many people don't pursue sexual harassment cases because they're embarrassed or, as I mentioned before, they fear career repercussions or simply don't have the faith in the systems and processes at their place of work to deal with a complaint. So look, I think that yes, the publicity of the case does add an additional disincentive, though I hope that it also does encourage both men and women to speak out against sexual harassment and come forward if they are actually victims.
And finally, what do you hope that events of this nature will achieve?
I hope that the event, like the DJ's case, shines a light on sexual harassment, which really is an insidious issue within the Australian workforce that needs addressing. We've had in Australia over 26 years of legislative protections, yet in 2008 the Australian Human Rights Commission survey found that 22% of women and 5% of men have experienced sexual harassment at work. So, look, events like this will hopefully improve this situation and make people aware of what sexual harassment actually is. You know, the same offences keep coming up in case law in our practice, and it's often behaviours that people don't realise amount to sexual harassment, like unwanted kissing, you know, suggestive emails or intrusive questions regarding someone's personal life. So hopefully people's awareness of what sexual harassment is and what is acceptable behaviour within Australian workforces will be improved. And finally, I imagine that the event will also remind people of the very real costs of harassment and discrimination, which really are huge and can't be overlooked. Obviously, there's the obvious financial costs like legal fees and penalties and share price drops, but the non-financial costs are significant too, and, you know, we see obviously adverse publicity is an obvious one, a decline in team morale, issues with productivity and retention. So in addition, there's obviously broader community impacts, which I think can't be underestimated. So really there's a lot of positives to hopefully come out of the conference, and I really look forward to both presenting and also listening to the other speakers talk about their topics.
Cilla Robinson, many thanks for your time today.
No worries at all.